Greetings all, and welcome to the 25th episode of TM Tactical Movement. For today, we'll be taking a look at the Snore, Hyper Voice, Uproar and Boomburst attacks, and the Growl, Roar, Howl, Screech, Sing, and Supersonic techniques.
As one might imagine from its name, the Snore attack involves generating a powerful snore so loud and deafening that it actually hurts anything that hears it. When most Pokémon are stuck in sleep and are unable to wake for some time, they're usually sitting ducks with no access to offensive moves outside of a random sleep talk technique. The Snore attack is the effective answer to this dilemma, though certainly not a perfect one. The Snore attack can't get much simpler than what it sounds like, a deafening snore designed to inflict damage on anything that hears it by generating noise so loud that it actually hurts the ears and bodies of anything directly exposed to it. It is still unknown how and why Pokémon are still able to hear their trainers tell them to use the move when sleeping, considering all the things go right over their heads, but it's possible it might just be a natural reflex. Regardless, the small amount of special damage the attack does is relatively minor compared to what the move is actually designed to do. Buy time. The Snore attack is effectively so loud and painful to hear that it will cause the opposition to flinch about 30% of the time, in turn giving the user the chance to wake up and prepare a useful counterattack. This might not make the move worth using in most cases, but at the very least, it can ensure that every single moment spent asleep is not completely wasted in battle, especially since it is affected by items like King's Rocks. Cisco found great potential with the move and released it as TM13 with their second generation line of TMs, but the public was not quite as receptive towards its specialized use, and the move was discontinued afterwards, though it was reinstated into its lofty position as TM24 in the company's 8th generation line of TMs before being discontinued again in the 9th generation line. Since the Snore attack utilizes sound as a weapon, only Pokémon with a soundproof ability will be completely safe from its effects, otherwise it is exceptionally hard to dodge. Armor can, however, help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack. The Snore attack is not designed for true offense, and is probably not something that needs to be worried about in most battles, but it is still something to look out for, and potentially counter with protection against flinching, as it means that even a sleeping opponent will not be completely defenseless. In effect, the Hyper Voice attack involves screaming loudly and harshly at the opposition in an attempt to inflict massive damage with concentrated sound waves. This move is effectively a roar technique that has been superpowered to the point where fear is no longer the focus, but an afterthought and damage becomes the primary attribute. The Hyper Voice attack is effectively considered to be the second most powerful of sound-based attacks, only outdone by the ludicrously powerful Boomburst attack, and is able to deal massive amounts of damage by delivering a blast of sound so highly concentrated that it actually has the potential to bust the eardrums of lesser creatures permanently, the pulsating pressure wave of the attack inflicting excruciating damage in the process. This blast takes a decent amount of stamina to properly execute, and is somewhat hampered by the fact that it essentially only deals normal type damage, but is extremely accurate up close and afar, has the capacity to ignore substitutes, and has a fairly wide spread pattern, so it can hit multiple nearby opponents in battle while only suffering a 25% drop in power. Moreover, the user of the move is essentially unable to turn its body to direct the concussive sound wave issued from the mouth during the attack, so it's generally impossible for an ally to get hit in a multi-Pokemon battle. Overall, the attack might not have a lot of special attributes for many strategists to favor, but for dealing simple damage quickly and efficiently, the Hyper Voice attack is a great move that can certainly work as a great defensive special attack when available, which helps to explain why it was instated as TR42 as part of Zivko's first line of TRs, and then TM117 in the 9th generation line of TMs. Since the Hyper Voice attack also utilizes sound as a weapon, only Pokémon with a soundproof ability will be completely safe from its effects, otherwise it is exceptionally difficult to dodge. Strong armor in general can, however, help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack, though weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well without sustaining critical damage or failing altogether. The Hyper Voice attack is a great special attack for its simple execution and plain typing, so it is a likely move to see among Pokémon that have the ability to elevate the voices to ear-shattering levels. As such, strong defenses and Pokémon that possess some form of resistance against sound-based attacks are highly recommended above all other options for reducing this attack's potential threat. In essence, the Uproar attack involves users shouting wildly and loudly at an opponent in an effort to inflict damage and keep them awake. The move itself is effectively a modified form of the Hyper Voice attack that is fueled by frustration and rage, which may partially explain why it can be manually taught to many emotionally unstable infant Pokémon, but not their evolved forms, and is designed to be isolated against a single target in battle. Once initiated, the user of an Uproar attack will shout wildly at the opposition, producing deafening shockwaves in the air that can damage the eardrums of anything that hears it and inflict considerable special damage on whatever they come into contact with. However, because this attack is designed to be fueled by rage than sheer power alone, the user of the attack will continue to use it an additional 2 times afterwards before it can manage to snap itself out of its state and change tactics, though this shift will occur immediately as the move strikes a ghost type. Moreover, as long as the user is in a state of uproar, the noise produced by it will be so loud that it will be impossible for any Pokémon on the battlefield to actually sleep until the move eventually ends. This alone can prove to be a nuisance for trainers, especially considering the move is affected by items like King's Rocks, but as an anti-rest move, this strike can easily decimate the opposition and prevent them from using the classic rest technique to restore their health in battle, in turn making it a move equally if not more viable than the devastating Hyper Voice attack, and helps to explain why it was made into TR-35 Pacifico's first line of TRs, and then TM-191 in the 9th generation line of TMs. Since the Uproar attack obviously utilizes sound as a weapon, only Pokémon with the soundproof ability will be completely safe from its effects, otherwise it is exceptionally difficult to dodge. Strong armor in general can thankfully help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack, though weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well without sustaining critical damage or failing altogether. The Uproar attack is a powerful tactical move that can easily destroy one of the most classic recovery moves and strategies associated with it in a heartbeat, but the fact the opponent must continue to use the move an additional 2 times afterwards can keep them in a lock that a heavily armored Pokemon with strong defenses and or resistance to the move's effects can take advantage of and overcome. Generally only seen among a very limited number of Pokemon, the Boomburst attack involves user releasing a massive blast of concussive sound waves across a wide area of the battlefield, dealing monstrous damage in the process. The Boomburst attack is so dangerous that it is occasionally banned in some tournaments, as the power of the move is usually too much for most Pokemon to biologically handle. While the Hyper Voice attack is designed to deal damage to a concentrated burst of sound, the move is usually directional, and thus the user has to hold back some power in using it, relying on damaging the ears from an opponent alone in order to trigger an effect of some sort. The Boomburst attack, on the other hand, involves the user generating a massive blast of concentrated sound that rockets out of the user's bodily orifices in all directions, releasing an explosive shockwave that's stronger than that emitted by large-scale bomb blasts, and dealing cataclysmic damage in the process that is nearly as extensive as that left by attacks like Hyper Beam. In terms of biological damage, this monstrous pressure wave is so ridiculously powerful that it not only has the capability of breaking eardrums, but in some cases has been known to rupture soft tissue and organs, literally shaking lesser creatures to very violent deaths if trainers cannot ensure that their Pokemon will hold back at least a little bit when delivering the attack. The blast takes a decent amount of stamina to properly execute, and is somewhat hampered by the fact that it essentially only deals normal type damage, but it is extremely accurate up close and afar, and has a widespread pattern, so it can hit multiple nearby opponents in battle, only suffering a 25% drop in power. Unfortunately, the uncontrollable nature of the attack's execution means that the user cannot accurately target what to hit and what not to hit, so usually ends up striking the ally closest to the user in a multi-Pokemon battle. Overall, the attack might not have a lot of special attributes for many strategists to favor, but for dealing massive damage quickly and efficiently, the Boomburst attack is a fantastic move that can certainly work as a great offensive special attack when available, especially since it does seem to be affected by items like King's Rocks. As expected, since the Boomburst attack utilizes sound as a weapon, only Pokemon with a soundproof ability will be completely safe from its effects, otherwise it is extremely difficult to dodge in close quarters. Strong armor in general, however, can help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack, but weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well without sustaining critical damage or failing altogether. The Boomburst attack is a devastating special attack for simple execution and plain typing, and while it may not be common enough to seem like a real threat, if the opponent just happens to have a fighter with access to this attack, there is no doubt whatsoever that they will utilize the attack to as much effect as they possibly can. As such, strong defenses and Pokemon that possess some form of resistance against sound-based attacks are highly recommended above all other options for reducing this attack's potential threat, as are tactics that can maximize the amount of damage the attack will do to the user's nearby allies in a multi-Pokemon battle. Much as its name suggests, the Growl technique involves cutely growling at the opponent in order to cause them to lower their guard and attack less harshly than before. Along with direct methods of dealing damage, many young Pokemon possess the ability to utilize specific techniques to hamper the opponent's offense or defense in an effort to preserve their own life as much as possible. Among these techniques, the Growl technique is without a doubt one of, if not the most fundamental of all. Instead of growling viciously at an opponent in an attempt to lower their guard, Pokemon using the Growl technique growl lightly in a cute manner in order to make themselves look pathetic and weaker than they actually might be. This has the effect of making the opponent more confident about their abilities, and in turn causing them to hold back their power and reduce their attack stat. The move is extremely cheap to use in terms of stamina, nearly impossible to avoid, and very effective against multiple opponents within a general area, so it can certainly, and usually does, prove to be an effective way of protecting oneself from harm, as well as making it more difficult for the opposition to attack as fiercely and as strongly as they may wish. Attacks or techniques that raise a Pokemon's attack stat or lower an opponent's defense stat and the soundproof ability are highly recommended for dealing with the Growl technique. As one might imagine from its name, the Roar technique involves loudly roaring at an opponent in an attempt to frighten them or otherwise scare them off. The Roar technique can effectively be considered to be an exaggeration of the basic Growl technique that trades deception for absolute dominance and fear amongst others. This move works completely off the fact that weaker wild Pokemon hearing it are likely to become so frightened by its noise that they run away without a fight, which is exactly how it functions against wild Pokemon of lower experience levels. In trainer battles the effect is similar, but the result is far different. Pokémon hearing the roar technique in trainer battles are still frightened by the sound of the loud noise, but instead of merely running away, they randomly switch with another waiting Pokémon on the trainer's team. This does no harm to either side, but this move can nonetheless screw up the battle plan to an opponent if they are relying on specific Pokémon to take the brunt of attacks while another is nursing its wounds, even though the move generally cannot be executed first for it to work. This unique versatility is what made Silphco convert the otherwise pointless move into TM-05 within the second generation line of TMs, to replace the less versatile Whirlwind technique, from which a cult following kept it on the shelves through almost all other subsequent generations until it was discontinued in their 8th generation line, though it did come back as TM5 in the recent Sinnoh Special Edition set, and then TM172 in the 9th generation line. As a result of its normally perfect accuracy rate, the roar technique is virtually impossible to counter in professional battles and difficult to counter in the wild. The only surefire way to counter the moves with a Pokemon that is of an equal or higher level, though only with wild Pokemon, has a soundproof or suction cups abilities, or is otherwise trapped in the ground as a result of an ingrained technique. As you might imagine from its name, the Howl technique involves howling loudly in order to raise the user's spirits and offensive capabilities. The Howl technique is certainly nothing more than a variation of the Growl technique that trades deception for personal satisfaction and confidence. By howling loudly and forcefully at whatever object or creature may be nearby, a Pokemon using a Howl technique can effectively boost its confidence and temper its spirit almost instantly, heightening its reflexes and increasing its attack stat in the process. The fact this technique is learned only by a limited number of families makes its otherwise simple nature fairly limited, but in truth, any Pokemon can howl. The difference is that these few species of Pokemon seem to be the only ones that naturally gain a significant boost in physical strength as a result. The reasoning why is likely genetic, and possibly suggests that the canine families that learn it may be directly descended from the same ancestor, but the truth is still speculative at best. Even so, when this move is available, it can often prove to be an effective way of increasing the amount of damage that can be done to multiple foes, and in turn make it fairly effective within trainer battles. Attacks and techniques that raise a Pokemon's defense stat or lower an opponent's attack stat are highly recommended for dealing with the Howl technique. As its name painfully suggests, the Screech technique involves generating an ear-splitting screech capable of harshly lowering the opponent's defensive capabilities and making it far more difficult to survive even relatively weak blows. Instead of growling cutely in order to make it harder for the opponent to attack harshly, the Screech technique is designed to inflict intense mental trauma in order to make an opponent much easier to damage. The Screech technique involves basically generating a powerful sonic wave that is both a low enough frequency that most Pokemon can hear it, but still high enough that it is extremely painful to the ears of those who have to listen to it. This massive blast of sound doesn't always hit an opponent perfectly enough to work, but when it does, it can cause so much hysteria and confusion among a single target that they become less able to defend themselves against physical attacks, and subsequently have the defense stat sharply lowered, about twice as much as normal. This can easily soften heavily armored opponents up to taking substantial damage from otherwise weak attacks, and can oftentimes decide the outcome of a single match if executed properly. On top of its low stamina cost, this makes the move a great technique to rely on if a lot of physical damage needs to be dealt to an opponent within a fairly short period of time, which might explain then why it was included as TM16 in Silphco's 8th generation line of TMs and TRs before being discontinued in the 9th generation line. Fairly agile Pokemon attacks and techniques that raise a Pokemon's defense stat or lower an opponent's attack stat, and the soundproof ability are highly recommended for dealing with the Screech technique. As one might imagine, the Sing technique involves singing to the opposition in an attempt to relax them to the point where they fall asleep from sheer comfort. Most creatures have a natural need for sleep, and are generally only able to do so when they are completely relaxed, or otherwise too tired to do anything else. The Sing technique takes full advantage of the former in its execution. By singing in a soft, soothing voice, Pokemon using the Sing technique can effectively relax their opponent by triggering pre-existing neural pathways that link melodic music with calmness, putting them so much into a state of complacency and calmness that they actually become drowsy and fall asleep. Most creatures able to hear the sound will be unlikely to experience its full effects if they are brimming with energy and exceptionally agitated. If this is not the case though, the chances of them falling asleep from the move are quite real. Sleep alone is a fairly deadly status condition for its ability to incapacitate most creatures until it wears off, so the technique's applications in combat are genuine. Sadly, the fact that it barely works more than half the time can make it little else other than a wildcard, but even so, its immediate effects are something that even veteran trainers need to be careful about. Pokemon that are mobile enough to get out of the move's effective range, as well as moves, items, and abilities that either cure or prevent sleep in the soundproof ability, are highly recommended for countering the Sing technique. Otherwise, the only thing that can really be done is to wait for the status condition to wear off. In effect, the Supersonic technique involves generating an ultrasonic wave capable of confusing any nearby creatures that hear it. To human ears, moves like Supersonic are very difficult to hear and otherwise impossible to notice. For most Pokemon, however, it is a deadly move capable of disrupting their balance and sending them reeling, the resultant pressure wave from the move causing temporary damage to a target's inner ear that disrupts its operations. The move is generally little more than a wing and a prayer, as the ultrasonic waves produced in this technique are little more than an irritant to even those that can hear it. If they are already flustered or otherwise unfocused, however, the screeching wave of sound is more than enough to disrupt their capacity to think and stay balanced, making them completely lose their mind and experience complete confusion. This stats condition can more often than not mess with the opponent's strategy, especially if the Pokémon does not have particularly strong mental focus, in turn validating its usefulness on the battlefield. Sadly, the fact that it barely works more than half the time can make it little else other than a wild card, but even so, its immediate effects are something that even veteran trainers need to be careful about. Pokémon that are mobile enough to get out of the move's effective range, as well as moves, items, and abilities that either cure or prevent confusion, and the soundproof ability, are highly recommended for countering the Supersonic technique. Otherwise, the only thing that really can be done is to wait for the status condition to wear off.
That's it for now, but look forward to the next set of moves here on TM Technical Movement. Thank you all for watching this video. It always brings me great joy to see others enjoying the work I do to try and make the world of Pokemon and the fascinating creatures that lay inside of it feel as real as they possibly can. If you really enjoy my work, please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, as I always do my best to respond to any and all comments that are left on my videos. In addition, if you wish to learn more about my work and help support it, you can find links to my Patreon page, as well as email and other contact information to my work on DeviantArt in the video description down below. Furthermore, you can find a link to my Discord server there as well if you'd like to get a first glimpse at what videos are coming up next and converse with other fans of the world of Pokemon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful rest of your day.